This is the first and very possibly the last forgotten relics ramble. We've given it that title for two reasons. Firstly, there'll be a certain amount of aimless wandering around looking at old bits of railway. But secondly, and probably more relevantly, we're going to be talking generally about that railway, some of its history and key engineering features. We're inspired on this occasion by a video Paul Whitewick did during lockdown. You may be familiar with Paul's videos. If you're not, do check them out. He does some fabulous historical explorations with his wife Rebecca. Paul set the challenge of doing a lockdown walk between your two closest disused stations. So we're going to accept that challenge. And the two stations we've chosen here in the heart of West Yorkshire are Earls Heaton and Ossett. The Great Northern Railway's line from Runtleins Lane Junction to Dewsbury was a product of engineer John Fraser and contractor Joseph Furbank. It opened to a temporary terminus just behind Dewsbury Town Hall on the 1st of May 1874. It was 1880 when it was extended through what became Dewsbury Central Station and Batley Car up to Batley. Once the through route was completed, it became the shortest route between Bradford and London and was therefore used by a number of services on the line down to King's Cross. It survived until February 1965. Arguably the most significant structure on the line was Earls Heaton Tunnel, 179 yards long and curving throughout on a radius of about 31 chains. Its keystone was laid in May 1873, after which the great and the good retired for a slap-up meal at the Man and Saddle Hotel. There are three things to note about the tunnel. Firstly, there's always a gale blowing through it, a characteristic it shares, I think, with Glenfarg South Tunnel. That was always very windy, as I recall. The second thing is there are no refuges. John Fraser simply didn't construct refuges in his tunnels until Major General Hutchinson took him to task about it when the Board of Trade inspected Queensbury Tunnel in 1878, and he noticed that there were no refuges and thought that really there ought to be. Fraser said, actually, this tunnel is 26 feet wide rather than 25, therefore you don't need refuges. But he was persuaded thereafter to put refuges in to all his tunnels. Hi. Hello. The other thing to look at is the construction joints. Typically, they might be 15 feet apart, depending on the ground conditions. Where construction had real problems, so places like Watford and Glenfield, you may get down to below 10 feet, but 15 feet was fairly typical. Here, the construction joints are 6 feet apart. And the reason for that is that in 1884, an inspection identified that the arch was failing. So the inner ring of brick was completely replaced, apart from a very short section at the far end of the tunnel. The tunnel was subject to a fairly substantial repair programme in 2012 before it was opened as a Greenway. Kirklees Council undertook the work, and I was very fortunate to be allowed in every week or two to take photographs. It's looking a bit the worse for wear, if I'm honest. You can always find money to do the works. What is often more problematic is finding money for ongoing maintenance. It needs de-vegging, and some of the brickwork repairs have not lasted particularly well. Some lovely cracks here and there. But what is certainly fair to say is that it's really well used. Even this morning, in the space of 10 minutes that I've been here, there have been lots of families passing through, which is exactly what's needed, isn't it? It's a fabulous resource and a wonderful structure, and even with its vegetation, there is something quite inspiring about it. 181 miles and 19 chains from King's Cross, we arrive at the the site of Earls Heaton station, opened on the 9th of September 1874 and closed in June 1953. There were two platforms at Earls Heaton. The main station buildings were on the north side of the line and built to the standard Great Northern design of the time, but instead of being in stone, as most of them were, Earls Heaton was in brick. The waiting rooms had very high quality fireplaces and up to dado level chocolate and cream tiles. Very tasty. The goods yard was further to the east. We tend to forget that stations had goods yards, don't we? It was quite amply sized, goods shed about here. On the south side of the line was a signal box, and there was a short spur line down towards the site of Chickenley Wood Colliery. Beyond Earls Heaton station, the line seems to break cover, passing originally what was Chickenley Cricket Ground, now a housing estate, wonderful open land to the south. And then it launches itself up a 1 in 50, 1 in 55 climb towards Runtlins Lane Junction, initially on an embankment, and then further up, entering a cutting.
Watch where you're going. Watch where you're going. Nearly. Come on.
Something there. Get down to it. Through the nettles. It's wonderfully tranquil down here, off the beaten track. Just above us you can hear people on their bikes and people pushing buggies up and down. But here at the bottom of the embankment, there is a little stream, and where you have a stream and an embankment, you obviously need a culvert.
Hello.
Hello there.
Seeing you.
We've reached the point where the Greenway connects with the original line between Wakefield and Batley, although the junction itself was some distance further to the east. This was a single track affair, opened by the West Yorkshire Railway in 1864 and headed to Batley via Chickenley Heath, where there was a station and a short tunnel. Further up, it passed through a longer tunnel at Shaw Cross and then down the hill to the other side. Once the Great Northern opened their double track line down to Earls Heaton, this became something of a backwater, and it lost its services in the 1950s. However, the far end of the line from Batley remained open until 1972 to serve Shawcross Colliery. And this is where Old Line and New Line met, Runtlins Lane Junction. The original single track branch crossed this road on the level, but to ease the gradient for the line down towards Earls Heaton and Dewsbury, the Great Northern excavated this area, dropped the railway down, and the road thereafter was carried on a bridge. Just over there was where the signal box was. The railway's final approach into Ossett was carried on a fairly substantial embankment which curved to the north as it entered the station. These houses on Heather View are built on its footprint, but there was a bridge which allowed access for the footpath through to the cricket ground. This part of Ossett has really changed beyond recognition. Where these bungalows are used to be a terrace of houses with a corner shop. On the other side of the road, those houses there was a congregational church, big spire. That was demolished in mid-70s. There was the old Sunday school there. Over here is where my grandfather had a tobacconist shop. I say shop, it was basically a wooden shack. And it's from here though that you can get the best kind of fleeting glimpse of the old station house, which is the fairly substantial brick building just through the gap between the houses and what's now called the Tap, but was for a long time the Masons' Arms. The railway approached on the embankment and crossed over towards the station on a metal span bridge, which was demolished in 1968 without any of the kind of paraphernalia you would associate with the 21st century health and safety culture. Lots of kids and people admiring what was going on. The only remnant really of that bridge is a section of retaining wall here, wonderful cobbled road up to the station, but just through there you can see the bricked up entrance to the subway that led up onto Ossett's Island platform. I used to go to school there back in the 19th century. Ossett Station, 179 miles and 46 chains from just when you start your piece to camera. Ossett Station, 179 miles and 46 chains from King's Cross. But this was not the original Ossett Station, that was actually at Flushdyke, short distance in that direction. The Bradford, Wakefield and Leeds Railway opened a single track branch there serving Roundwood Colliery in 1862. The railway only opened to here on the 2nd of April 1864, and for a short time Ossett was the end of the line until the through route to Batley was completed. It was only when the Great Northern took over in the 1870s that the station assumed far greater importance. There was a single platform with running lines on either side. The platform was pretty much where these houses are now. Access onto the platform was either via the subway from Queen Street, or there was a covered ramp that took you down from Station Road Bridge, just about here. Once you got down onto the platform, there was a collection of timber buildings and a wooden canopy at either side that had conveniently placed benches beneath it. The platform itself was on a curve, so if the train was particularly long, the porter and the booking clerk had to come out and assist with train dispatch duties. The bridge is still here, although there's concrete fill beneath it and the original iron parapets have been replaced with these stone walls. On the north side of Station Road Bridge was a set of steps which led down into the goods yard, which had ample accommodation for stabling and marshalling purposes. The goods shed was over here where this brick building was subsequently built, and then over the back of that was Intake Lane, which the railway crossed on the level. Next to it was Ossett East signal box, which controlled the crossing gates. There had at one time been an Ossett West box, but that was destroyed by fire in the 1950s thanks to a spark from the heating stove. Ossett Station welcomed its last passengers on the 7th of September 1964, after 100 years of service. Goods continued to arrive here until February 1965, but here we are 55 years later, and Ossett, with its population in excess of 20,000, no longer has a train service. That's progress for you. So there we are, Earls Heaton to Ossett on foot. Not the most exceptional piece of the Great Northern's very considerable empire, but we mustn't underestimate how much of an impact it had on the communities hereabouts following its opening in the 1870s and after closure. We can at least be thankful that it is fulfilling some useful role as part of an active travel route. there we are then. That's the first Forgotten Relics ramble. We hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time. Cheers then.